Hello everyone, it's great seeing you again and welcome to Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, hazardous weather graphic, snow advisories or winter weather advisory for snow. Susitna Valley and also for the areas of the Matanuska Valley, and that's stays in effect for tonight, Sunday night until 6 a.m. Monday morning. And in the case of the Susitna Valley, looking for 8 to 16 inches of snow to fall by 6 a.m. Monday morning. Heaviest amounts will be over toward the Alaska Range. And then in the case of the Matanuska Valley, looking for 6 to 12 inches of snow to fall there, again by 6 a.m. Monday morning. Heaviest amounts will be in the west, and it'll tend to possibly lighten up. So areas up toward, as you approach Sheep Mountain, for example, will be lighter. And so moving on to satellite imagery, you can see one mass of clouds here moving off to the east with the main area into the Yukon here, and then kind of thinning out as you head back to the west. Another band of moisture right through here, bringing a fair amount of snow today to the Susitna, or the Susitna Valley, back across the western Alaska Range and into the Kuskokwim Valley. Snow reported all across the Kuskokwim Valley the entire day today, especially McGrath, Nikolai, and extending out across the Yukon Delta. And much lighter amounts, though, for the Kenai Peninsula and Cook Inlet. Moderate snow falling this afternoon at Talkeetna, with anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of snow falling in the Matanuska Valley. And that extends down to Iliamna. They had about 2 to 4 inches of snow falling there with moderate snow this afternoon. But only flurries around Homer across the inlet. And some more moisture here in the Alaska Peninsula, but nothing too heavy here, with low pressure just northeast of Shimia there, about to pull colder air down. Snowfall levels dropping back down towards sea level late this afternoon and this evening. Weak disturbance passing across the northern panhandle just brought some very light rain and snow to Yakutat today and in the afternoon today, with about the same flurries, Juneau, and areas of the northern panhandle. Clearing down to the south over the southern southeast coast. You can see there with temperatures rising into the lower 40s. Klawock was a warm spot this afternoon at 3 p.m. with 42 degrees, contrasting that with Kaktovik, the coldest spot at the same time today at 15 below zero. Otherwise, mainly below zero up here over the Arctic, or the Brooks Range, North Slope, and Arctic coastal areas. And in the teens to lower 20s, southern Alaska. Lower to mid 30s here for Kodiak Island and the southern Kenai Peninsula areas over towards Yakutat, as well as the Alaska Peninsula. On the chart today, areas of snow here along this trough axis, kind of an Arctic boundary right here, with the colder, drier air back to the north and west here, and the you can see weak southerly flow, milder, more moist air here off to the east, and that bringing the fair amount of snow into the Susitna Valley down along the Alaska Range today. And kind of a mixed condition here, Kodiak Island, although very light, Alaska Peninsula into the eastern Aleutians. Gusty winds, not too bad though, a little more of a gradient here over the Aleutians, as well as the Alaska Peninsula, anywhere from 20 gusts 35 miles an hour, and that's about it, with showers of rain and snow back to the west on the backside of that low center of the southwest quadrant, and just fog this afternoon at St. Paul Island, down to a half mile in fog there, so low IFR, and also lower flying conditions, light snow and fog, St. Lawrence Island, Savunga, Gamble, back up into the Bering Strait today, and some light stuff there in the western Arctic coast. For tonight, that shifts eastward to the east side with improving conditions back to the west, and kind of offshore flow continuing, so it'll stay decent here. St. Lawrence Island should lose the low clouds, fog, and flurries there, hopefully, going VFR for the Yukon Delta as well. And then snow on the north side of the front here with a mixture of rain or snow and snow showers, tapering off as you get down toward the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, Fox Islands area. Rain and snow definitely for Kodiak Island, 100% chance tonight of measurable moisture, and that extends and increases up along the North Gulf Coast as this trough lifts up there. And the rain-snow line, real narrow there, with any elevation at all to be in the form of snow. And that extends into the northern panhandle, not too much into the southeast coast tonight. Still this band of light snow extending into the Fairbanks, Nenana area from Denali on up to the Eagle area. And beginning to get a little colder air mass now coming into the northern Bering Sea, Chukchi, into the western interior. And we'll see for tomorrow, this low pulls off to the east here into the northern Gulf of Alaska, southern Prince William Sound, just south of Montague Island, with periods of snow for Prince William Sound, periods of snow, of course, northern Cook Inlet and Matanuska Valley, especially the Susitna Valley, moderate snow there, up along this trough axis to the northeast, across central Tanana Valley, Fairbanks area, into the Eagle area there, with numerous snow showers here for the Pribilofs with that 999 millibar low just to your southwest there, and the colder air bringing snow and snow showers into the western Aleutians, eventually into Atakatka as well, with rain over the southern southeast coast. Probably a dry day for places like Metlakatla, Ketchikan, and Stewart. And then taking a look at the Monday forecast, this low, another low tracks eastward, so in the afternoon look for increasing winds, rain, and snow over the southern panhandle. Otherwise, pretty good chance of some snow over the northern central areas, extending back along the North Gulf Coast. Snow continues and becomes showery in the afternoon as this low slowly tracks eastward, but kind of stalling out due to the push of cold air coming down in the west again. Another round of pretty frigid temperatures coming into the western interior. Eventually will make their way into the central areas all the way down to the Gulf of Alaska, actually probably by Tuesday, Wednesday, with overnight lows even in south central Alaska falling back below zero. And then pretty gusty northerly winds drop those snowfall levels back to sea level here for the eastern Aleutians, north side of the Alaska Peninsula. A little bit of a break with some ridging out here, not too strong though. Next system stays west of Shimia with the snow. Otherwise, high pressure takes over the northern Bering Sea, and the trough keeps a chance of flurries, fog, lower flying conditions in along the Arctic coast. Lows for tonight, again, well below zero here, near zero in the Tanana Valley. South of the mountains, southern Alaska, milder temperatures, as low as 25 to 30 below for the eastern North Slope. And for the southeast coast, 20s to near 30, mid to upper 30s here, Alaska Peninsula, eastern central Aleutians, and upper 20s for the Pribilofs. Highs tomorrow, 5 degrees for St. Lawrence Island. And staying below zero here, Kotzebue Sound, northern Seward Peninsula, areas of the Berks Range on up to the Arctic coast, into the upper 20s, lower 30s, southern Alaska, near 40 for Kodiak Island, near 40 for the central and southern panhandle like today, and then overnight lows in the 30s there for the southeast coast, back down into the teens, southern Alaska, below zero, of course, central and northern interior, and your afternoon highs on Monday, mid to upper 20s, mid-20s southern Alaska, below zero along the Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather. Band IFR here from western Aleutians, Kisk Island, Amchitka, northward, and then cutting to the east here across the Pribilofs, Bering Sea, into the southwest coast, then along something of the more or less Arctic boundary here, up into the Yukon Flats, and IFR through the Barren Islands, into western Cook Inlet, the Susitna Valley, and definitely the Kuskokwim Valley, IFR North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, into southern Copper River Basin, more or less, and then eastward to Yakutat, improving here with VFR, southern Panhandle. Afternoon forecast, that area breaks here and leaves a chunk of IFR for the Pribilof, south central Bering Sea. Aleutians mostly or marginal. Same thing for the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay breaking out to VFR, VFR northern Bering, including Nunivak Island, Yukon delta through the Bering Strait looks pretty good tomorrow afternoon, and northeastward across much of the Brooks Range, marginal for the North Slope, and not too bad for the Arctic coast. IFR extending from the southern Yukon Flats areas into the central interior, southward again, northern Kuskokwim Valley, Denali, all of the western Alaska Range, now covering all of Cook Inlet, and the Matanuska Valley, probably marginal there, but IFR for the Susitna Valley, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, Gulf of Alaska, Northern Panhandle, IFR, still better, Southern Panhandle, some areas of VFR lingering, also improving, not too bad, trending toward VFR for Kodiak Island, and later tomorrow night and in through early Monday morning, stays VFR though, although marginal creeping into the southwest. Area of IFR here still over south central Bering Sea and almost to Atka Island, but not quite. Areas of VFR and marginal VFR, northern Bering in the western interior here, and the central eastern North Slope, marginal VFR, eastern Arctic coast, same thing. IFR persisting, again, the southern and southeastern Yukon Flats and across the White Mountains, say into the Fairbanks area, and then southward, again, Susitna Valley. Now, Matanuska Valley looks more IFR than tomorrow, northern Cook Inlet, and that extends along Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast. IFR, the entire southeast coast for the afternoon. IFR, southern half or two-thirds of the Panhandle, marginal VFR to the north. IFR lingering here along the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, northward, western Copper River Basin, Talkeetnas, up into the central and upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, even north of Eagle, and then marginal VFR from there on up to the eastern Arctic coast. VFR back to the west, drier conditions, Kodiak VFR, along and north of the Alaska Peninsula, marginal VFR with better conditions south side, and mostly marginal for the Aleutians and central and southern Bering Sea. Passes for tomorrow, Sunday, starting out marginal for both Anaktuvuk and Adigan, becoming VFR, and for the western Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR the entire day, rainy IFR, windy IFR, and Isabel, same forecast, IFR for the day Sunday. Mentesta, though, call it marginal at times, and Tanita, also marginal. And for Portage, IFR, Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels here, area of warmer air trying to come northward, but getting shoved off to the east here by the jet. So 2,000 feet just catches the Alaska Peninsula at the surface right over St. Paul Island at 4 a.m. in the morning or 3 a.m. Kodiak Island, hugging the North Gulf Coast on down the Panhandle. Icing, moisture coming up, and so areas of considerable moderate rime icing possible 4,000 to 6,000 feet or so above and on up for the North Gulf Coast, northern Panhandle, and then along this boundary here, areas of icing not quite as heavy as here along the North Gulf Coast. And jet stream, Arctic jet here coming across south of the polar low there, near the Arctic coast, 50 knots. Main jet almost up here to the Aleutians, not quite, 130 knots, and dive southward, kind of splits. And at 9,000 feet, westerlies 40 knots coming across Kodiak, 45 for the Alaska Peninsula, 25 or 35 knots into the Panhandle. Westerly there with that trough axis, not too bad, 10 to 20 knots, and 30 knots central Aleutians, 20 to 25 at 3,000 feet. And about 25 knots across Kodiak or so, much lighter and variable, kind of a trough axis covering the interior there. Southwest 10 to 20 or 25 into the Panhandle. Look for occasional moderate chop, northern Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, areas of the Copper River Basin, Kodiak Island, and the Alaska Peninsula.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Toman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks, or we've been in a cold weather pattern, looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that.
That's correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away, the computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How, using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for Southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns, not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7 day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks, where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often we don't, at this point, we don't have much to say in that because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook. And on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Thoman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's a Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to AC Ice Analysis. Still showing the outer edge there of the thinnest ice, very close to Northeast Point, St. Paul Island, and then kind of extending down into pretty ice-covered Bristol Bay. And looks like this area of the ice edge will continue to expand northward, say from near or just west of the Pribilofs eastward, and the extent or the progression out here farther to the west will be slower with lighter winds as high pressure kind of builds in over the area there. And looking at coastal water forecast, southern southeast coast here on the outer coastline, south to southwest, 15 to 20 knots tomorrow. South 20 knots for the north coast, seas 7 feet. And Lynn Canal, kind of a variation there, pretty gusty pattern with sustained winds of 15 knots from the southeast and gale force gusts of 35 knots. And Stevens Passage, southeast 20, gusts 35. Clarence Strait south at 15 with 3-foot seas. Then for Monday, southeast 25, small craft advisories now for Clarence Strait. Southerlies at 20 knots with the central northern inside waters, seas at 4 feet. 30 knot southerlies there along the coast of Prince of Wales Island, and then for the central coast here, west-southwest at 25 knots, seas 12 to 14 feet, southeast 20 on the extreme north coast. Prince William Sound tomorrow, small craft advisories, east winds 25 knots, seas 6 feet. Small craft advisories, south winds at 30 knots here for the eastern North Gulf Coast, becoming or diminishing to about 20 knots here as you head into the western zones. Barren Island, southwest 20. Northeast 15 Kamishak Bay, Cook Inlet, north winds at 15 knots with 3-foot seas south of the Forelands. Outlook for Monday, even lighter winds here, still out of the north, but only 10 knots for Cook Inlet, increasing to small craft advisories, Kamishak Bay, northwest 30 knots as that cold air begins to spill back into the area here, and 20 knots so for the Barren Islands, western North Gulf Coast, northwest 20 as well, southwest 20 for the Middleton Island zone, and Prince William Sound, northwest 15 with a few higher gusts. And for Kodiak Island, small craft advisories, west, southwest, 25 to 30 knots, strongest at Shelikof Strait, seas 7 to 8 feet. Small craft advisories, Alaska Peninsula, west-southwest winds at 25 knots with 8 to 10-foot seas, and westerlies at 30 knots for Bristol Bay. And taking a look at the Monday forecast, Shelikof Strait northwest at 20. Otherwise, east side Kodiak Island, west at 15, north 20 for Bristol Bay, and small craft advisories here for the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula with northwest 20 from Cape Sarichef all the way up there to southern Kodiak Island at Sitkinak. And for the Fox Islands, southwest 20 to 25 knots for Sunday, 8 to 10 foot seas. Same thing for the Central Aleutians, Adak and Atka with 8 to 13 foot seas, southwest 20 to 25 knots. And then that swings around to the northwest, and then northerlies 25 into the western zone. And on Monday, westerlies 25 knots from Shimia in toward Adak, and then here Central Aleutians, gale warnings, northwest 35 knots, strongest for Atka Island. And northerlies at north to northwest on Alaska Island, 30 knots, Umak Island, gales, northwest 35. Southwest coast tomorrow, brisk wind advisory south of Nunivak Island along the Kuskokwim Delta coastline, 25 knots, northeast 25 for the Pribilof, St. Matthew Island, Yukon Delta coast, St. Lawrence Island, north at 20 knots, and Norton Sound north at 15. North 15 knots, St. Lawrence Island on Monday, and we got brisk wind advisories here for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, a little lighter there along the Yukon Delta. Small craft advisories for St. Paul, St. George, north at 25. Central, all of the Beaufort Sea, all of the Arctic coast here. West, light, 10 knots, and then northwest here from Cape Lisburne to Point Hope, and then south of Point Hope to Wales, northwest at 15. And the outlook for Monday, no change here for the Chukchi, northwest winds 15 knots, and west-northwest 10 to 15 knots here for the Arctic coast, 15 knots a little more likely there toward demarcation point. For tonight again, winter weather advisory for snow, 8 to 16 inches expected to fall total by Sunday morning, by Monday morning at 6 a.m. here for the Susitna Valley, 6 to 12 inches Madanuska Valley, and lesser amounts for northern Cook Inlet. And otherwise for tonight, rain and snow south of this boundary and snow to the north. Colder air beginning to move in here to the western and northwest interior with this Arctic ridge pushing in from Russia. And that even gets a little colder and pushes farther eastward for Monday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.